The 192-minute J.J. Abrams' Rise of Skywalker cut is coming sooner than you think. I found this article January 2nd, 2020. I'm not saying that this article is 100% accurate, but they claim that they have industry insiders. Let's check it out. 3 hours and 12 minutes. According to anonymous sources inside multiple organizations like Lucasfilm, Disney and Bad Robot, and confirmed through additional reporting like Deadline's interview with the Rise of Skywalker editor Marianne Brandon, J.J. Abrams and TROS team struggled with wanting to release the cut that more closely matched the director's vision, but were disallowed from doing so. That cut, the J.J. Abrams director's cut, clocking in at no less than 192 minutes. But why? If there was a more complete cut, that could include all the amazing moments JJ wanted fans to see. Would the final theatrical version be less than? For what insane reason would such a short-sighted decision have been made? I won't make you wait for it. The reason Disney brass were so concerned about The Last Jedi divided fans and created a maelstrom of anger towards director Rian Johnson, that they didn't want to leave anything up for chance. An insider tells the story is not the story, that they wanted to ensure that The Rise of Skywalker wrapped up the trilogy neatly without creating any conflicts with fans of the original 3 films, though delivering moments that brought back classic characters, introduced special Jedi powers, and reversed the Luke Skywalker moments that fans couldn't stomach. That's funny that Disney thinks this way because it surely didn't wrap anything up neatly. It made more of a mess of everything. It was already a mess, but The Rise of Skywalker certainly hasn't helped. They also didn't want a film that was over 3 hours, which would have reduced the number of times the film could have screened on a daily basis in theaters, thus reducing their potential box office. And with The Last Jedi having divided fans, the last thing Disney wanted was to divide them any further, but they'd lost their way. Even Disney's Bob Iger had admitted to the brand's oversaturation after Solo and didn't want to saturate the brand any further by delivering a cut they weren't sure could get it done. Disney didn't even know what the fans wanted anymore. They were shooting fish in a barrel. If this final movie was also a misstep, they'd want to bag as much money as they could as quickly as they could, and a 3+ hour cut wouldn't let them do that. I think that most of us would have preferred a 3-hour film. Not only would they have been able to spread out the film and elaborate on a lot of things, build more characters and stories, and they could have gave us more content. So I think it actually would have played to their favor instead of ramming all this into a film. But as you can see, Disney's always thinking about money first, and they're thinking about how many times they can play the movie in a theater as opposed to how important the fans are that support a franchise. For J.J. Abrams, it was whiplash. Disney wanted to deliver a movie that would make up for the last one, but after all the sequences and cameos were shot, they were told it couldn't all fit into a 140-minute goal that didn't want to exceed. When you're filming so much stuff, you can't necessarily calculate how much time the film is going to amount to. Editing is a key part of filmmaking, naturally. But in 2020, with so much technology and so many things studied, I would think that you could get a good idea of how long a film is going to be. If you were actually organized and put out a solid plan for a film, you might be a half an hour over or 10 minutes over, but in general, you should know that you have 3 hours of content or an hour of content or what have you. Again, it's impossible to really know until you really have filmed everything. A lot of things come up on the set, improvisations. Until you really get it to the cutting room floor, you won't know. But this isn't new Hollywood. This is well-experienced, well-versed 2020 Hollywood. And to not have an idea that what you filmed isn't going to fit into a 140-minute goal, it's just not realistic to me. And Exceed they did. The cameos and callbacks were so numerous. It was too much to pack into a film. Yet JJ didn't want to let anyone down. Some felt that they had overdone the fan service to the point of ridiculousness, mandating the return of characters like Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan, Samuel Jackson's Mace Windu, Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon Jinn, Jake Lloyd's Anakin Skywalker, and even a trip back to the Sarlacc pit. There were sequences shot on Endor that were referenced in The Rise of Skywalker, yet only showed up in a 3-second wide shot featuring some of the Ewoks. While Disney did mandate a return for the Emperor, there were even more characters who landed in footage that was cut out of the final released cut. A Cloud City reference brought back Lobot alongside Billy D. Williams, but was cut for time. A Wampa cameo was removed at the last minute, and a secret Boba Fett connection was said to have also been written, shot, but never finished in post. Some interesting things here. Jake Lloyd's Anakin Skywalker. That's little boy Anakin. Why would they even bring him back? How would they bring him back? That's very interesting. The Sarlacc pit, I always love that scene. I've put it in some of my other videos. I think that would be interesting. I'm not sure how it would really fit, but that's one of my favorite scenes from all the Star Wars movies. If you've been watching my videos and paying attention, I'm a huge Boba Fett fan, so that connection would be great in my opinion. How well would it really fit in this Disney trilogy? Probably not at all. I prefer the story to be cohesive and make sense than just get my Boba Fett fan service. And I also suspect that they say a secret Boba Fett connection, which to me is a connection to the Mandalorian, not Boba Fett. I've saw talk today of the Mandalorian possibly showing up in future Disney films, crossing over. Apparently Pedro Pascal has been in talks for playing the Mandalorian in upcoming roles to cross over into future Star Wars films. I don't know how smart that is, but there is, of course, the possibility of showing Boba Fett coming out of the Sarlacc pit, but the timing is kind of off. 30 years later, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it probably would have been just some cheesy reference like, oh, look, Boba Fett was here. But let's get back to that 192-minute J.J. Abrams cut. According to the editor of The Rise of Skywalker, Marianne Brandon, they barely had the time to get the current cut into theaters. They wanted to do so much more, as was witnessed by the rushed opening to the film and according to anonymous sources on the inside, as the reviews and backlash has begun to build around The Rise of Skywalker and the not-so-great critical reviews, the lowest of the entire 9 films. Disney brass began to change their tune. Maybe 192 minutes wasn't so bad if it meant there was an opportunity to bag even more box office like they'd done on Avengers Endgame by including additional footage 2 months into its release. The game plan had worked on Endgame, and as early as December 28th, the rumbling started to grow louder. What about releasing the extended version of The Rise of Skywalker into theaters around late January after the fanboys and girls had already paid to see it once or twice? The plan would be to release a longer version that included 3 to 5 additional sequences, then hint at the even longer director's cut for its digital and home entertainment release. With an exclusive run on Disney Plus, they would draw even more engagement by keeping those added sequences not in the re-release as exclusives to the service. That would clearly drive even more subscribers to the new streaming service as well. This all looks like it was a marketing ploy. They're going to re-release the movie at the end of January with a few extra scenes to try to get you to come back. I think that Disney knew that this film was going to struggle, and they're playing every angle they can to keep getting people to come back to the theaters. The problem here is this: the people that are going to go back for 3 little scenes are going to be the hardcores. But when you've disregarded the hardcores all these years and you made this terrible film and trilogy that has upset all the hardcores, how are you going to get them to come back for 3 little scenes? Disney, I think, took a really big and terrible gamble here, and they're going to eat it hard on that decision. Will some people go back just for those scenes? Sure, but most of us aren't going to. So here we sit with the JJ cut trending and the internet abuzz, wondering what's real and what's next. The word is this: an extended version of The Rise of Skywalker will be announced in the coming week, releasing near the end of January and including 3 to 5 additional sequences fit into the narrative. This should bring the cut up from 142 minutes to about 165 minutes. Rumored sequences to be included in this cut involve an extended Endor sequence that occurs before the final shot in the current film, Lobot and Lando in a sequence that predates the chase in the desert, and a slew of Ghost Jedis returning alongside Luke and Leia and participating in the final sequence to unseat the Emperor. The Ghost Jedis, alongside Luke and Leia, that would have gone over even worse with the I'm Rey Skywalker. Everyone would be really pissed if all the Jedis were there along with Luke and Leia. It already has everyone infuriated, but it would have just made it really worse if all the Jedi ghosts were there. On the adverse of that, having all the Jedis participate in the final sequence to unseat the Emperor might have been awesome and respectful to the franchise. Instead of making Rey this Super Mary Sue, they could have had the Force Ghost defeat Palpatine, and that would have changed the game. There's still a ton of problems with the movie, there's still a ton of problems with the trilogy, but that would have gone over 1,000 times better with the fans, instead of just having Rey saying, I'm all the Jedi, and crossing lightsabers and defeating Palpatine. This new cut will be simply treated as an extended cut, and will include a post-credit sequence highlighting additional sequences that will be released with the official Blu-ray release of The Rise of Skywalker, which will have a special J.J. Abrams director cut version of the film at 185 minutes. When The Rise of Skywalker enters the streaming window exclusively on Disney Plus, it will include an additional 7 minutes of extra footage that didn't get finished in post-production as a part of its exclusive run on the streaming upstart. This is what we're hearing at SNTS. As we explained up top, this was from folks on the inside who tipped us anonymously. So you can take this as gospel or drove. That's up to you. Okay, so we don't know how accurate this is. Apparently, we're going to find out in a few days an announcement, and by the end of January, we'll know for sure. We can pretty much at this point confirm that there was a bunch of extra scenes between Kelly Marie Tran's interviews, Dominic Monaghan's interviews, various comments from John Boyega, also from Oscar Isaac. We can confirm at this point that there was a bunch of scenes left on the cutting room floor. We also, if this article is true, see that there's going to be A, a re-release in the theaters with 3 to 5 extra scenes, B, a bunch of extra time added to the Blu-ray release, and C, on Disney Plus, it will have 7 minutes of extra footage on top of that. So going to the theater is only going to support Disney more for their marketing ploys, which I wouldn't suggest to anyone. And what are you really going to get out of those extra little scenes? Probably not much. It's going to be the same film. Buying the Blu-ray also only helps support Disney, and you don't get the entire film. So the smart route here is to just wait it out for it to be on Disney Plus. For all we know, it might come out on Disney Plus before Blu-ray. But it's apparent, if this article is correct, that you'll get the most film out of watching it on Disney Plus. So just keep that in mind. Maybe rather than going to buy the Blu-ray and supporting Disney in that sense, you could get Disney Plus for $7 a month. You get The Mandalorian, and you get the full cut of The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know how Disney's going to play that. It may come out much later after the Blu-ray, or it might come out before. We'll see. I would almost guess it's going to come out before on Disney Plus. One, because of production. It costs a lot of money to mass produce Blu-rays, then you have to ship them and stock them in stores, whereas they can overnight upload the movie to Disney Plus and they're immediately in the game. This would also massively drive up the subscriptions, and although I don't know if Disney's going to release the numbers, we all can assume they took a huge hit now that The Mandalorian is over on their subscriptions. There's probably a ton of people that have canceled their Disney Plus. So this is a way to bring people back to the Disney Plus service. Remember that it's not always about the physical money, it's a lot of times about the appearance. So regardless of what Disney is making off of Disney Plus, they want to show shareholders and the public that we have X amount of subscriptions. So regardless of what they're making on Disney Plus, they're going to want to pick back up a bunch of subscriptions that they've just lost from The Mandalorian. So within maybe just a couple months here, they'll have The Rise of Skywalker on Disney Plus just to boost up their subscription numbers and to justify it to the shareholders and to the public that Disney Plus is something you want to invest in and have as a service, as opposed to Netflix or HBO or whatever other service. So I could see Disney putting a spin and taking advantage of that, trying to drive Disney Plus memberships, putting The Rise of Skywalker out there first with all the kit and caboodle to really suck people in. Remember that you buy a Blu-ray and that's a one-time purchase. I don't know if they're going to make a super special edition box set, whatever. They did announce a box set that's going to have all the movies, but as far as the actual Rise of Skywalker Blu-ray, that's a one-time purchase. And what are we talking? $20, $30, one time. Whereas they could potentially bring in people to Disney Plus and at least get a year subscription or several month subscription. So Disney, looking at the big picture, will probably want to rush and push the Disney Plus way. January 2nd, 2020, Rise of Skywalker editor opens up on rushed production, agrees film is fan service. It's a struggle. It affected everything. J.J. Abrams' longtime editor Marianne Brandon says of rushing to meet the December 20 release date. Most critics agree that Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is a disappointing finale to the 9-film Skywalker saga, and many have been wondering since the film's December 20 release whether or not it would have been stronger had the production been given more time to breathe. While appearing on the Rough Cut podcast via the playlist, Rise of Skywalker editor Marianne Brandon admitted that the film's production was rushed, which made for a challenging editing process. Brandon is Rise Rise of Skywalker, director J.J. Abrams' longtime editor, having worked with him on TV's Alias, plus Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek, and Star Wars The Force Awakens, among other projects. We were definitely still trying to figure out a lot of stuff. Brandon said about the sped up editing process, it's a struggle. It affected everything. About a third of the way through, Lucasfilm president Kathy Kennedy was like, JJ has got to spend more time in the cutting room. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. Not with the schedule that we're on. Not with what he was dealing with on a daily basis. He was just exhausted at the end of the day. And that's interesting. Kathy was insisting that JJ spend more time in the cutting room. So it appears that she wasn't concerned with JJ finishing his vision or finishing sequences of the film as opposed to getting the editing done. And I'm curious if it was the editing that Kathy wanted. According to Brandon's estimates, the Rise of Skywalker crew had 3 months less to work on the latest Star Wars movie than was the case for The Force Awakens. Disney set a December 2019 release date for the movie that could not be moved, forcing Brandon to edit on set so that the production schedule was maintained. That's another interesting take. Why would you force and rush any Star Wars film? Remember that Lucas always took 3 years on each of these films, and Disney has taken a route of 2 years on all of their sequel trilogy films. I don't know if that's an ego thing, like, hey George, look, we can do it faster and better, but I feel like they just wanted to get this Skywalker saga out of their hair, and that's why they've killed everyone and destroyed everything. They just want to move past Star Wars as we know it and create the new Mickey Mouse Star Wars. So it's interesting that everything was so rushed, so time crunched, when Disney can very easily say, hey, we need another 3 months and we're going to release it in March. What it was is they wanted to crunch this thing, get it over with as fast as possible, and naturally they wanted to benefit from the Christmas runtime. I suggested I cut on the set. We had 2 tented rooms, so I just went wherever JJ was, usually 10 feet away from the camera, wherever the camera was, Brandon said, and I just mobily cut. And in between takes, JJ could sit down with me and we could go over things. Now, it's not unheard of that some editing goes on in the set, but something so big budget, so important, a 42-year end saga, it's very strange that they're being so pressured and forced to be editing on the set as they're filming. This whole thing is just very strange. As for the negative critical reception of The Rise of Skywalker, Brandon said, in a time when the whole world is polarized, it should not be a film that is polarizing. Basically, the message of the film is, hey, you know what? You can be bad and good can come into your life. And maybe if you're open-minded to it, extraordinary things can change your mind. And you have to believe there's always hope. One of the biggest complaints thrown at Rise of Skywalker is that the movie is pure fan service, which is not a claim Brandon will try to fight. Look, sure, it's fan service, the editor said, but if you didn't service the fans, it would be, oh, he didn't go along with the history of Star Wars and what it all means. Now listen to that. It doesn't matter what fan you are of. The Hulk, Spider-Man, My Little Pony, Star Wars, whatever. You always like to see old references, a G.I. Joe movie, Transformers, whatever. It's nice to see nostalgia from something that you grew up with and loved. But I don't think that Star Wars fans ever called for fan service. I myself, and I can't speak for everyone, but I would think that most Star Wars fans were not dependent on reliving the past or having a ton of references to the past. We're not stuck on the old Star Wars. And this is a misconception that the toxic news and the toxic fans seem to have in their mind, that unless it's Return of the Jedi all over again, we're not going to be happy. That's not the case. All we asked for was respect of the story and the characters. So we don't need all the fan service, and yet Disney goes the entire opposite side of the scale and just totally destroys Luke Skywalker. When what you should have done is respected Luke Skywalker, finished his story, and you could have cut out 2/3 of all the fan service, because we aren't stuck on reliving the old movies. We just wanted to close the story, close the book on what Luke Skywalker's legacy was. For 15 years, people have been wanting to see Luke Skywalker finish his saga. What was going to happen with that hero that we left that was just beginning to mature as a Master Jedi. So it's just interesting interesting that Disney took this route of destroying the past, but yet we'll dump a bunch of nostalgia in and that'll win the fans over. When it's like you had to do the exact opposite of just respect the past and create a new story. We weren't against a new story. We just wanted you to respect the history and the lore of the past. That doesn't mean be stuck in the past. That doesn't mean recycle and redo the same stories or continue the story from the next day after Jedi. Just maintain the continuity and respect those characters. And if you're going to take advantage of anything, there's no bigger nostalgia than Han, Luke, and Leia, Chewie, R2, C-3PO, Lando, all back together again. They could have done this whole swashbuckling adventure with the classic crew. If they were smart, what they probably should have done is Episode 7, do a whole adventure with them. Start to introduce the new characters. The old characters start to pass the torch to the new characters throughout Episode 9. And then by the time Episode 9 comes, Leia would have passed. Luke would have retired or passed. Han could finally get his Harrison Ford wish of being killed. And you could have passed it on. And then all the new characters throughout 7 and 8 would have been trained and informed and educated and schooled on the history and what's going on and how to proceed forward. And it would have been a blessing from not only the characters, the classic characters, but the fans to say, okay, Rey, or whoever, Finn, or whatever character they decide to develop, now it's your time to shine. And all of this would have gone over 1,000 times better. I know that most fans probably were like me, thinking it's going to be all about Luke, and that's probably what we had thought we would have preferred, is a whole story about finishing Luke's legacy, and that would have certainly worked. But I also think that if Disney would have taken the care and the time and the love to pass the torch, as opposed to Rey just coming and snatching it and extinguishing all the old flames, and just not only taking the torch, but now burning brighter than all of the entire history combined. That's the problem. So there you go. There's some updated news on the JJ cut. We'll see if this all comes to fruition. We all know at this point there are a bunch of additional scenes. I've put it in some of my videos, and of course a ton of other creators are showing evidence of a lot of other content. But it's also becoming very apparent that this is a marketing spin by Disney. I feel that Disney knew this was gonna not tank, but that was not gonna be well received, and they didn't want to take any chances with releasing the full cut. They would have had people saying, oh, the movie's too long, and it's still the same result. So Disney's playing on a marketing angle of re-releasing things, and every time they release it, first in the theaters, then on the Blu-ray, then on Disney Plus, they're going to keep adding content to get you to come back and come back and come back. And maybe they think that they can do that because Lucas did that. Although it was spread out over years, Lucas re-released the movies. I had the videotapes, I had the laser discs, I had the DVDs, I had the Blu-rays, I have the CD soundtracks, but that was from the creator and that was spread out over years. Disney, I think, assumed that they're going to be able to just keep re-releasing it and fans are going to come rushing in droves to keep regurgitating Star Wars, and it's just, they're going to see that it's not going to work. I think that this marketing ploy of bringing it back out with a few extra scenes to bring in more people is going to be a big backlash. People are going to get angry because you should have just released it in the first place. The hardcores are already disenfranchised, so they're not going to go back to it. And what Disney was counting on to get more people in is actually going to blow up in their face, and nobody's going to go. We'll see what happens. We'll see when and if this stuff releases. It's obvious that there is more content. At some point, they're going to release at least some of it, and we'll see just how much. Is it going to make the film any better? I really doubt it. It might lessen the blows slightly. It would be very cool to see Mace and Anakin and Obi-Wan and all these ghosts. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to be 1 minute more and the ghosts standing around and saying, Rey, do what we couldn't do because you're the bestest ever, Mary Sue. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the video. May the Force be with you.